Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Scott Denny, and I'm a neonatologist and clinical researcher at the Indiana University School of Medicine. I also serve as the chair of the Pediatric Policy Council, or PPC, a public policy collaborative of the four leading pediatric academic organizations: the Academic Pediatric Association, the American Pediatric Society, the Association of Medical School Pediatric Department Chairs, and the Society for Pediatric Research. Since 1984, the PPC has served as the advocacy arm of our organizations, allowing us to speak with one voice on issues impacting pediatric research and child health. The PPC has two representatives from each of the four groups and myself as chair, and we work to develop and execute an advocacy agenda that leverages the unique expertise of pediatric researchers to affect change at the federal level. Our work ranges from engaging with lawmakers on Capitol Hill to providing input on NIH policies. We also mobilize members of our organizations at critical moments in the legislative process to advance biomedical research funding or prevent damaging cuts to key child health programs, among other important issues before Congress. On behalf of the PPC, I'd like to welcome you to Making Your Voice Heard, Advocacy for the Academic Pediatrician. This webinar is intended as a primer in the essentials of pediatric research advocacy. We will discuss what advocacy is, why it matters, and how you as an academic pediatrician fit into the policy-making process. Then we will get into the tactical details of advocating, from meeting with your legislators to engaging with them from home so that you'll be able to prepare to act when the time is right. This webinar can be viewed at any time for those who would like to start advocating on child health and research issues that matter to them or in preparation for a coordinated advocacy effort. Before we begin, I'd like to share my own personal advocacy journey, which began over 15 years ago as a member and subsequently chair of the AAP Committee on Pediatric Research. We identified a specific advocacy task. Although the NIH required the inclusion of children in clinical trials, there was no requirement to report the number of children who participated in clinical research studies sponsored by the NIH. We embarked on a mission to convince the NIH to initiate reporting requirements for children to better understand the successes and potential gaps in the effort to include children in clinical research. This seemingly simple advocacy task required sustained interactions with multiple leaders at the NIH, congressional committee involvement, and ultimately legislation mandating the reporting requirement. It literally took an act of Congress. This was an intensely valuable experience, allowing me to work over an extended period of time with highly talented people engaged in the effort. It also taught me the necessity of persistence in advocacy and an understanding of how long timelines for advocacy success can be. This effort took 10 years. Advocacy is truly a marathon and not a sprint. I'd now like to hand the webinar off to James Baumberger of the American Academy of Pediatrics Washington office. James is Senior Director of Federal Advocacy of the AAP and leads the AAP team that provides staff support and guidance to the PPC. He will be walking us through the fundamentals of advocacy.
Thanks, Dr. Denny. So let's start by talking about what exactly advocacy is. Simply put, advocacy is action taken to influence decisions. Our government makes decisions every day that impact the lives of children, pediatricians, and researchers. Advocacy, in our case, are the activities we undertake to ensure that these decisions are best for children. Of course, advocacy is not easy because it requires us to try to influence things that are not in our direct control. So another way to look at advocacy is that it is creating a situation in which change can occur. trying to alter the dynamics just enough so that our preferred outcome is realized. We say that advocacy is a team sport because it always takes a number of people working together towards the same goal. But it, of course, starts with you. Like Dr. Seuss wrote in the Lorax, unless someone like you cares an awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. One final way to look at advocacy is this. Do what you can with what you've got where you are. Most change in American history has been evolutionary, not revolutionary. Advocacy is not about changing the world overnight. It's about doing what you're able to do to improve the world one step at a time. If advocacy seems like something you've never done before, it's really not. As clinicians, you've been doing individual level advocacy your whole career in the work you do with children. Community advocacy is taking that individual advocacy one step further into your community. And state and federal advocacy is trying to effect broad systemic change by changing laws and other government policies. Influencing the debate is a key component of advocacy. Politicians only respond to what people are actually talking about. Children, healthcare, and science won't be a part of the political conversation unless we make it that way. But there's a lot of noise in Washington, of course, and we always have to be working to cut through it. Here's an example of something we've done to raise the profile of children in the debate over spending priorities. AAP and the PPC collaborated to produce a document and video focused on 7 great achievements in pediatric research. It details 7 areas in which government-funded research has greatly improved the lives of children. So this is a resource that can be shared with policymakers. When we're advocating, for instance, for funding for the National Institutes of Health, it helps give concrete examples of ways in which NIH funding has helped save the lives of children, including through vaccinations, by curing childhood cancers, and promoting safe sleep for babies. Sometimes academic pediatricians tell us that advocating for research dollars seems self-serving. But you know that it is research that leads to improvements in pediatric practice and ultimately improves the health and well-being of children. So this shouldn't make you shy away from advocating for yourself, but it should remind you to always make the connection for policymakers so they know how your work impacts child health. Advocacy doesn't require you to be an expert in the political process, but a little knowledge of how it works helps. Here's how a bill in Congress becomes a law. Pretty simple, right? The key is just to understand that advocacy can impact every part of the process, from the House to the Senate, in committee or for votes of the full chamber, even to the president who signs bills into law. If you want to learn more about the legislative process, congress.gov has a great resource, and the link is on the bottom of this slide. Now we'll talk about how exactly academic pediatricians fit into advocacy, what makes you great advocates, and some of the unique things you'll need to consider as you work to make advocacy a part of your career. Academic pediatricians are natural advocates because chances are you selected this field because you're passionate about improving child health. Pediatricians are obviously trusted by parents, and that trust translates to policymakers as well, which will help you get your message across. You are also experts in child health. I promise you, you know a lot more about children than the policymakers you'll be talking to. Lastly, as an advocate, you'll be focusing on your own legislators, your senators, and your member of Congress. You have power with them as a constituent, someone who lives and votes in their district or state. There are some special considerations you'll need to keep in mind when you advocate, since you are likely employed by an academic institution. Your institution probably has one or more government affairs staff. Get to know them. They can be very helpful resources. Also keep in mind that when you advocate, you'll be advocating on your own behalf, not on behalf of your institution, unless you've made prior arrangements to do so. If you work for a public institution, there may be other regulations you need to be aware of, so check into these first. But regardless of where you work, you always have the ability to participate in the political process. That's protected by the First Amendment. Advocacy is in the DNA of pediatrics, but it can be challenging to work advocacy into your busy life, especially with responsibilities like clinical service, research, and teaching. Advocating for your own advocacy within your own institution can often be necessary. If you carefully document your activity, it can sometimes be useful for academic promotion. The advocacy portfolio might be a useful tool for you. It provides a standardized format for documenting advocacy activities, and this could be helpful in getting protected time for your work. Visit the link at the bottom of the slide for more information. Meeting directly with your legislators is a crucial advocacy skill. It's one of the best ways to inform policymakers directly about what's important to you and to ask them to take action. In this section, we'll help explain how to do it. First things first, you need to schedule your meeting. Members of Congress are busy people and their staff are busy too, so this can take some persistence, and that's normal. Each state's senators are listed on senate.gov. If you don't know who your House member is, there's a tool at house.gov that will tell you your representative based on your zip code. Find the contact information for your legislators on their website and call their office in Washington, D.C. This is usually where the schedulers are based. Let them know that you are a constituent, tell them where you're from, and let them know that you'd like to meet with the legislator. You can meet with them while Congress is in session in Washington, D.C., or back at a state or district office if Congress is in recess. Legislators get more requests for meeting than they can realistically take, so sometimes you'll be asked to meet with staff, and that's perfectly okay. Staff are indispensable to members of Congress and advise them on how to vote and what issues to prioritize.
PPC staff at AAP can help provide you with materials that will help you conduct your meeting. This will usually include one-pagers, which are short fact sheets with talking points and asks on priority issues. They're designed to leave with the office you're meeting with. They will help you frame your meeting and will help the person you're meeting with remember what you've asked them to do. So send an email to Pediatric Policy Council at aap.org for up-to-date materials. As you prepare for your meeting, there are some things that will be helpful to know going into it. You need to know who you're talking to, your audience. You'll also need to know a bit of the political context, and you'll need to know the message you plan to share. Let's talk about each of these one at a time. First, do some research on the legislator you're meeting with. This information can easily be found with a simple internet search. Each member of Congress has a website that includes a short bio and usually information on issues they support. Learn their background. What party do they belong to? What did they do before getting elected to their current position? Does your member of Congress sit on important committees? Are there specific issues that are particularly important to them? If there are questions left unanswered by your research, you can ask them when you meet with them. That's part of the process. You'll want to know what makes your legislators tick and use that to inform your advocacy. For instance, say your legislator has a grandchild with a severe peanut allergy. You might want to share information with them about research into treatments for food allergies. It's always helpful to get a sense of the political context regarding the issues you want to talk about. Here are some things to think about. How does your issue fit into the current priorities of your legislator or the current priorities of Congress? Who might not be supportive of your ask? Is there a timeline for when this issue will be resolved? Is government funding needed? All these issues will lead into your ask and how you make the case for it.
On Capitol Hill, you'll need to be prepared for anything. You could meet in the hallway. You could meet in a crowded office lobby of your member of Congress. You could meet in a spacious conference room or the member of Congress's personal office. You could have a brief 5-minute meeting. You could have a long meeting of 30 minutes or more. You could meet with a seasoned health policy advisor or a brand new staffer who's barely outside the age range of pediatrics and may not understand the difference between pediatrics and podiatry or Medicare and Medicaid. You could be meeting with someone who completely agrees with you or someone who doesn't at all.
Crafting your message in an effective manner is the most important thing you can do to have a productive meeting. You want your message to be clear. The message must be easily understood in words that can be internalized and repeated by others. So use language that you would use to talk to the parent of a patient. You break down technical jargon for your patients and families every day. Use the same rule when creating your message. Be concise. Your message must be to the point. Keep in mind that most people have very short attention spans and like their information given in concise ways. Be memorable and be persuasive. Messages stick when they're captivating. And the best way to be memorable is to tell a story. Stories are much easier to remember than facts. Lastly, repeat. The average person needs to hear something several times before it sticks. Here are a few other tips. First, don't worry about being a policy expert.
No one is expecting you to be. You're an expert in child health and a constituent, and that's why your perspective is important to your legislator. Second, pick a few key points that you make sure you want to get across. This will help make sure you don't get bogged down in the details. And finally, I'll say it again, tell a story. Stories are perhaps the most important advocacy tool you can use. The key to a good meeting with a legislator is exactly the same as for a visit with a patient. So the good news is you already know how to do this. So in your patient visits, you humanize clinical terminology so parents can understand. You establish a connection with the patient and the family. You ask open-ended questions. You make eye contact. You validate parent concerns. You serve as a trusted resource of pediatric expertise. You're used to dealing with families and children in vulnerable emotional states. So just like a patient visit, in a Hill visit, you'll humanize the ask so staff understand how it impacts children. You'll establish a connection with the staffer. You'll ask open-ended questions, make eye contact, and repeat the ask. You'll also, again, serve as a trusted source of pediatric expertise. And at worst, you'll have to deal with a skeptical staffer, and that's certainly nothing you can't handle. There are several different types of responses to your messages that you should be prepared for. First is someone who agrees with everything you say, which can feel a lot like preaching to the choir. It can be easy to discount the importance of a meeting like this. So here are a couple things to think about. First of all, thank them. Legislators get a lot of angry messages from upset constituents. It's nice for them to hear words of thanks and encouragement. Also, give them stories. Legislators are always looking for real-world stories from their state or district to help them make their case. And also know that even though they may agree with you, your advocacy can be essential into ensuring your issue gets to the top of their priority list. Think of your goal as to make a supporter into a champion. A supporter is someone who agrees with your issue while you're in the room. A champion is someone who's thinking about your issue when you're not. Second, you can meet with someone who seems like they disagree with everything you say. Here you want to avoid the temptation to double down and get in an argument. Make your case calmly and persuasively, and if you don't see eye to eye, try to meet them where they are and see if you can find some common ground. Lastly, you might have someone who has truly not made up their mind. This is a great and rare advocacy opportunity, but you're certainly up to the task. You can think about breaking the process of a meeting into 4 steps: introductions, storytelling, issues discussion, and follow-ups. You want to first introduce yourself as a constituent. Let them know what you do for a living. Establish connections with the staffer who might be from your district or state. Then you want to tell your story. Stories are more memorable than facts and talking points. So describe your research and why it's important. Tell a story of a patient who could benefit from more research or already has. Discuss your asks and share your leave-behind materials. Lastly, follow up. This is the most important part. Exchange business cards and send a follow-up email.
Ideally, you want to develop a long-term relationship with your legislator or their staff. You want to establish yourself as a go-to pediatric expert for this office, so make the offer to help them with any child health issues they are working on. Developing this type of relationship can take persistence. Remind yourself to check in periodically. A good opportunity to do this is when you see a relevant newspaper article or a new relevant study. Email it over to them. Also, next time you get a federal grant award, reach out to your legislator's office and let them know. Thank them for their support of federal research funding. You can also invite your legislators to come visit your institution. This can be a great way to build a relationship. Before you do this, though, you should probably check in with the government affairs staff at your institution. If you can't meet in person with your legislator or their staff in their Washington, D.C. or state or district offices, you can still have an impact advocating from home. First, you can pick up the phone and call your Senate or House offices. This is particularly helpful when bills are moving in Congress and you want to get on the record supporting or opposing a particular policy. A staff member will record your general message and potentially take note of your address or zip code to make sure you're a constituent. Each member of Congress has software that helps them track calls. Offices take note of how many calls they get for or against particular legislation, so these calls are tracked immediately. Calls can be very impactful. For instance, during the debate over the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, calls against repeal outnumbered calls in favor by 10 to 1. Members of Congress have cited this groundswell as an important reason for their ultimate votes to oppose the bill. You can also send webmail to your members of Congress through their House.gov or Senate.gov website. This can be especially helpful if you want to share a longer message that cannot easily be relayed over the phone. Each office has different practices for logging and responding to webmail communications, but generally these take longer to log than calls. You can also amplify your message by using social media and traditional media strategies. Every member of Congress has a Twitter account. Tweeting at them using their handle can be an effective way to get issues on their radar. This isn't a replacement for phone calls or emails, though, since social media messages are not recorded in the same way that traditional communications are by congressional offices. The benefit to platforms like Twitter, though, is that it can easily facilitate group engagement. It can allow you to participate in broader advocacy campaigns related to topics that are important to you. Lastly, when you do meet with your member of Congress, take a picture with them and post it on social media and thank them for their support of children. Earned or traditional media is still a very effective way to influence policymakers. Op-eds are opinion pieces, usually about 500 to 600 words in length, that can be submitted to the editorial board of a newspaper. The best op-eds tell a compelling story about a timely issue and include a call to action. Letters to the editor are shorter pieces, about 150 words, and usually respond directly to a news article or opinion piece published in that newspaper. Both op-eds and letters to the editor can be important advocacy tools. Congressional offices closely track the opinion pieces published in their local papers, which can often be more impactful than pieces published in national publications. In today's digital world, a piece in a local paper can easily be shared across the country. You can also reach out to your congressional offices and directly share the piece with them. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope this has given you some helpful tools that you can use to integrate advocacy for child health and for pediatrics into your career. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can email us at pediatricpolicycouncil@aap.org.